Welcome to Dark Celtic History.
Six Tales of Monsters from the Water's Depth. If you like my stories, check out my writing at www.authorjeffreymcdonald.com. The Celtic world has more than its share of the supernatural, legends, and myth, which sometimes cross the line into reality. I tell those tales here on Dark Celtic History. Human. The Tom, Mother, and Baby Home. 1970s Ireland. Catholic priests were still telling girls not to wear miniskirts in public, as though they were a biblical harlot about to be cast out and stoned to death. You know the scene. Two school lads are out playing in a field in Ireland in the mid-1970s when they find a big stone. Being mischievous boys, they work harder than they've ever worked before in their lives, and they lift that stone, only to discover it covered a hole that they were all too eager to climb in despite the danger. Stephen King's stories start this way, with two innocents uncovering something horrifying. But this wasn't fiction. This wasn't some made-up story on the supermarket shelves. It was Tom, County Galway in 1975. And the hundreds of little skeletons the two boys found in a disused sewage tank were all too real. The Catholic Church held incredible influence over Ireland at this time, and the fact that 796 babies' remains were just found at the Tom, Mother, and Baby Home run by the church had little impact. The clerical word was the last word, and the people fell into line, and the atrocities the church committed were lost to time. That explains why you could uncover a grave of almost 800 dead infants in a disused sewage tank in the 1970s, and yet a great silence would descend over and cover it all up. The Pope was infallible. Then so was the church and all of its agents. There was nothing to see here. You can go on about your business, move along. So people did. They moved along and they kept on moving. But time brings change. And change, well, change opens minds that were thought to be nailed shut and thrown down a well. The Catholic Church was not interested in having this discussion, and so a huge silence descended over Ireland once again. People often vanished into that huge silence, I discovered. All kinds of people who didn't fit the story that the country was telling about itself. Unmarried mothers, children born out of wedlock, the children of the poor and the addicted, the mentally ill and the disabled. You could find yourself unfamilied and warehoused in some gloomy institution with high walls and stern nuns where you could vanish for years, decades, even forever. It happened to tens of thousands of Irish people. It happened to the most vulnerable. They were ruthlessly cast out, sent off stage to be silenced, and hopefully disappear. It was always for their own good, never for ours. That's what we told ourselves. Of course they knew. They simply did what people did when confronted by abject horror. They shuddered and thanked the stars it was happening to someone else, not them. It was always fear, not piety, that kept their mouths shut. To believe that the little bodies would be exhumed after they were discovered in a mass grave there, well, was just a foolish thought. Let them rest in peace and silence. A young nun who returned to the site years later to pray for forgiveness for her actions, or rather her inaction in the matter, knelt near the stone monument and prayed. She thought about the young mothers who thought their babies had been given to loving, caring families, who in reality had been thrown into a disused sewage tank alive because it was inconvenient. Abortion was an abomination, but murder, that seemed okay. Letting a newborn baby starve to death was somehow acceptable. A woman who had given her life in the service of God knew she had done wrong. Even if she had not cast out the babies herself, she was culpable because, well, she knew. This is why she was here. She begged for forgiveness from her God every day, but living so far away in America was not far enough. It didn't seem to be enough. She needed to be here on this sacred ground and feel the tremors of unspeakable acts flow through her. She needed to wail in pain. She needed to forgive herself. As night begins to fall on her vigil, she lights a candle and continues. However, she cannot escape the feeling of dread and the eeriness of her situation as light fades into darkness. She is often awakened abruptly from a nightmare in which the babies climb out of the sewage tank and come after her, ripping her flesh from her body and pulling her underground to join them in the hell she helped make for them. She looks around and a bead of sweat rolls down her cheek, as her situation is reminiscent of her ghoulish nightmares. The next morning, passerbys notice the young nun slumped over near the monument, thinking she's just asleep. They roll her over, and to their horror, she's dead. Dead at 40 years of age of a massive heart attack. She looks so innocent lying there, and the only marks on her body are little handprints upon her cheeks. Years later, it seems, the babies that Tom want their story told. This week on Dark Celtic History, Willie the Carse, or Willie of the Carse. Now, Willie had been injured during World War I by having his nose shot off. Wow. The locals, though, were back at his home near Inverness, treated him very badly by calling him names and picking on him, shunning him. Now, he owned a farm between the railway line and the ferry, and had a herd of Highland cattle grazing on it. You know, he used to ride his horse and play cowboys and Indians and have fun, but these people made it hard on him. Willie gained the reputation, though, of being the area boogeyman, and all sorts of stories have been told about this man. One in particular, though, is that he was the guardian of a large rectangular object in the mud that you can see is known locally as the Witch's Coffin, which gives its name to a local tidal pool enclosed by the railway embankment. Apparently, he discovered the coffin's secret and its curse, according to the people. Willie was given the name Willie the Carse for an area he is tasked with protecting by the witches of the coffin. Willie will chase you from the area. He may even do you harm. After all, several have entered the Carse and not returned. Ooh. Actually, in real life, the coffin is a brick structure, which is underwater at high tide. Apparently, it is actually the remains of foundations for a crane for loading and unloading of boats and trains. And there's nothing really sinister about this. The people of this area, around this marshland, around this park, treated this man horribly for years until his death. This man lived his life being everybody in this area's boogeyman. It's kind of sad. I would like to take a moment to apologize. In this next video, The Monster of Glom Castle, I keep saying Glamis, and well, that's wrong. In my defense, though, somebody had given me a brand new bottle of scotch, and well, I probably shouldn't have done that and made a video at the same time. So, anyway, it's on me. Enjoy.
The Monster of Glamis Castle.
He was an heir to one of Scotland's noblest titles, but is said to have been locked away in a secret chamber in the family castle, his existence denied after being born seriously deformed. Thomas Lyon Bowes quite cruelly became known as the Monster of Glamis, with the tragic birth of his heir feeding the imagination of Victorian storytellers, local gossips, and likely even giddy aristocrats keen to entertain their guests after dinner. What is known is that Thomas was born on October 21st, 1821 at Glamis Castle in Angus, with the official record stating the baby boy died on that very same day. His parents were Thomas, Lord Glamis, son of the 11th Earl of Strathmore, and Charlotte Lyon Bowes. The couple were the great-great-grandparents of the Queen Mother, who was also born at Glamis, as was her daughter, Princess Margaret. Rumors started circulating in villages around Glamis Castle immediately about the supposed death of young Thomas, which were likely fueled by reports from the midwife that Thomas had survived the birth. An apparent lack of a gravestone for the boy probably supported the suspicions surrounding his fate. Over time, the story grew, though. Allegedly, a workman who encountered Thomas in a passageway close to the chapel was offered money by the Earl to immigrate to Australia and never tell a soul of what he had seen. That workman's passed down what he knows to his son, and then it was passed to his grandson. This is how we come to know of the monster of Glamis Castle today, dispelling all myth and rumor and telling the cold, hard facts of incest, murder, conspiracy, and revenge. Added proof of the tale is how the estate manager refused to step foot in the castle after being told about the purpose of the secret chamber. Sir Walter Scott, famous writer, wrote of an eerie night that he spent at Glamis, in which he referred to the secret chamber. Although he mentioned no monster in that article in 1830, a later version of his story featuring the monster appeared in the New York Times in 1864. In 1908, edition of Notes and Queries, published by Oxford University Press, goes into great detail about the mystery of Glamis, with the writer claiming that he had known the story for 60 years. The writer claimed to have spoken to the workman in Australia and had certain facts so close to the truth that it was no surprise when he came up. No trace was ever found of him. It said the story was that in the castle of Glamis, the celebrated old castle of the Earls of Strathmore, is a secret chamber. In this chamber is confined a monster, who is the rightful heir to the title and property, but who is so unpresentable, so disfigured, that it is necessary to keep him out of sight and out of possession of everything he is entitled to. The secret is supposed to be known to only 3 persons: the Earl of Strathmore, his heir, and the manager of the estate. Depictions of the mysterious Earl also emerged in time. Jacinth Hope Simpson, in her book Who Knows, suggested that the boy may have suffered a genetic defect, given that the child's parents were actually cousins first removed. The historian Mike Dash, who writes for the Charles Fort Institute, also wrote of a second secret of the Glamis legend that emerged during the 19th century. Far from being home to an unwanted heir, the secret chamber contained the remains of members of the rival Ogilvy clan, who came from lands at nearby Kirnmere. Unable to admit that he may have been the cause of his son's deformity and mutation, Lord Thomas Glamis filled his son's head with tales of rival clan Ogilvy and the magical vengeance spells the witches of that clan had probably cursed upon him for the wrongdoing by our detached forefathers who clashed with their clan from time to time. Then one day, after members of the actual rival Ogilvy clan had sought refuge at Glamis during a storm, they were allowed in the property, given hospitality as it always should be given in the Highlands, and shown into the chamber, though, where they were barricaded in and starved. Thomas Lyon Bowes, the monster of Glamis, was able to get the revenge he had dreamed of after years of psychological torture by his father. He ripped them to shreds and stacked their bodies to rot. He would not let anyone near or even view their bodies. He considered their bones his conquest, his trophy. The Historian Mike Dash wrote that their skeletons still scattered on the floor was a secret that the Lyons family was so anxious to conceal as to kill to do it. While the true mystery of Castle Glamis remains unexplained, it does appear true that the castle was burdened with a particularly dark secret, one that grew and got increasingly uncomfortable, though. Thomas Lyon Bowles, the monster of Glamis, became bored with his secret chamber after a few years, and when he became strong enough, he vanished. He was given a meal one evening, and the next morning, when servants went to collect the dinner tray, the secret chamber door was unlocked, and the adjacent window was open. Footprints could be seen easily in the mud of the dew-drenched lawn. The prints went all the way to the nearby stream and were lost forever from there. Thomas Lyon Bowles, the monster of Glamis, was gone. Claude Bowes Lyon, the grandfather of the Queen Mother, who inherited the earldom in 1865, reportedly said, "If you could even guess the nature of this castle's secret, you would get down on your knees and thank God it was not yours." Reports say that for a few years, the family was forced to make payoffs and bribes to keep any incidents nearby the castle quiet. And then one day, it all just stopped. It is believed that Thomas Lyon Bowles, the monster of Glamis, had died, but no one knows for sure because no body was ever found. The end.
Woohoo! Stop the presses.
Here.
Ready?
Hold it right there. Did I say the end? Now, I don't often get the chance to add to any of these stories, yet on watching the new drama on Netflix called The Crown, I was forced to rush to confirm what I had just seen. To my amazement, it was all true, and it directly adds information to the story that I just told you. Princess Margaret, after having some health issues, went to see a therapist, and it was there that she was informed that her family was plagued with mental illness. Now, it was then she was horrified to learn about the sisters. Now, first she looked into the official record and found that the sisters were recorded as having died. But then she did some sleuthing, and her and a friend of hers who was a priest, they found the sisters. Nerissa Bowes Lyon and Catherine Bowes Lyon, first cousins of Queen Elizabeth, were secretly incarcerated in the Royal Earlswood Asylum for Mental Defectives in 1941, along with other relatives of the royal family who suffered mental illness as well. Total of 5 of them. They were squirreled away and forgotten, yet these sisters knew exactly who they were and what family they belonged to, even in their diminished capacity. The official reason for keeping them hidden away from the public was to hide the fact that there was mental illness in the royal family, for they had already had their share of mental illness shown publicly in the past. Now, was it a cover-up? A mistake? The Queen Mother admits she knew all about Nerissa and Catherine's institutionalization, but did nothing about it so that her bloodline would seem pure. Beyond the cruel connotations of the explanation, what that essentially means is that Queen Mother was trying to prevent anyone from having a reason to dispute her husband, George VI, taking the throne after his brother, Edward VIII, abdicated. Now, the scandal uncovered after Nerissa's death in 1986 was the subject of a 2011 documentary. Sadly, though, all this could have been avoided with a simple, logical analysis of the bloodline. You see, the therapist that Princess Margaret went to see figured out that the mental illness was hereditary, but it was not from the Bowes Lyon family. Genetic experts determined that all 5 of these women potentially had a genetic disorder that caused disabilities in the female members of the bloodline on their mother's side. And since none of these people who were in the institution had had children, this mental illness is going to die out with them. It has no effect on the royal family. Yep, they hid it away. Sad. All right. Well, just thought I'd add that little bit to it for you. Hope you enjoyed it. The Gorbals Vampire, the iron-toothed child eater. Now word of the Gorbals vampire spread from lip to lip. Wide-eyed, the children relished this tale of horror. The word was that it had pale skin, its eyes were red, they glowed in the dark, it was 7 feet tall. It had sharpened fangs made of iron. You'll never guess where it lives. In the gravy. It's a colloquial name for southern necropolis, the toughest part of Glasgow. Now their voices dropped to a merest whisper. With bated breath, they listened and waited to hear of the next victim. 2 local children had gone missing, never to be seen again. Rumors abound that they were eaten by the monster, no doubt. Hearts raced, and knees turned to jelly. News of the Gorbals vampire spread like wildfire, from child to child, from playground to playground, and school to school. But these children were not the faint-hearted type who might sneak under the bed covers and close their eyes tight as they relived the tale of nightmares. No, these were some of Glasgow's toughest, raised in poverty and with the knowledge that survival meant facing your deadliest fears. People and children went missing around here all the time, but never by a vampire. Soon children began reporting that they had seen the monstrosity for themselves, and others swore they knew a friend who had seen it. Not willing to sit back and wait to be its next meal, the school children, in a bout of never-before-seen organization and cooperation, hatched a plan. As the school bell rang at 3 p.m. on September 23, 1954, some 400 children raced out of the school grounds and headed for the southern necropolis. Many had makeshift weapons, kitchen knives, sharpened sticks, stones, and even the odd dog was enlisted to help in the search. They were determined to kill the vile creature who was preying on them. Ronnie Sanderson was 8 years old when he got involved in the hunt. Later, he would say of the evening in question, "It all started in the playground. The word was there was a vampire, and everybody was going to head out after the school. At 3 o'clock, the school emptied, and everyone made a beeline for it. We sat there for all ages on the wall, waiting and waiting. I wouldn't go in because I was a bit scared. I think somebody saw someone wandering about, and the cry went out, 'There's the vampire! There it is!' That was the word to get off the wall quick and get away from it. I just remember scampering home to my mother, and she yelling, 'What's the matter with you?' And I said, 'I seen a vampire.' Then I got a clout in the air for my trouble because, well, I didn't really even know what a vampire was." Tam Smith, who also took part in the hunt, later recorded that red light and smoke flared up and made all the gravestones leap to life. You could see figures walking about at the back, all lined in red light. Imagine the children's horror when a great burst of fire lit up the night in the vicinity of the cemetery. Even more screams erupted from the terrified youngsters. The vampire was burning its victims. The locals called the police, and soon Constable Alex DeProse was dispatched. Arriving at the scene, he stared in amazement as children ranging from 4 to 15, armed with stakes and crosses, hunted amongst the crumbling tombstones. There were even some adults in the mix. "When I appeared, I felt like the Pied Piper of Hamelin," he said. "All shapes and sizes of children streamed after me, all talking at once and telling me of the vampire with the iron teeth. This I could handle, but when grown-ups approached me and asked earnestly, 'Is there anything to this vampire story?' I started to make me think." However, the children were not easily dispersed. More police still arrived, and they were intent on hunting down the monster. Eventually, Edward Cusick, the headmaster of the St. Bonaventure's primary school, was called out and gathered all the pupils together to reassure them that the vampire story couldn't be true. Then, in typical Scottish fashion, it rained. Now, all the children were forced to go home. But over the next few nights, a small but persistent group of vigilantes, hell-bent on killing the vampire, continued their search in the graveyard. The story made national press. It soon became apparent that there really wasn't any missing children. None had been kidnapped by a vampire or any other creature for that matter. The children in question were on vacation with their parents And for the activities at the graveyard, well, the flames that burst were from the Dixon Blazes Steelworks, who had added a second shift on. However, the media firmly laid the blame of the hysteria at the door of American comic books with chilling tales such as Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror. Alas, these books were corrupting the imaginations of the children, they said. The media demanded the politician take action and to prevent this from polluting the young minds. And these terrifying and corrupt comic books had to go. Apparently, in December 1953, an issue of Dark Mysteries, there was a story entitled The Vampire with the Iron Teeth. Now, this was said to be the apparent source of the mass hysteria. But the reality was that the American comic books would have been beyond the reach for the poverty-ridden children of the Gorbals. None of the children even had a television at home. Many had never even read a comic. Most of the children had no idea what a vampire even was. Unfortunately, the main issues driving the hysteria, their poverty, had been largely ignored. With the media baying for blood, a strange coalition formed between the teachers' union, Christian groups, and the Communist Party, who wanted to stop the American influence spreading throughout the United Kingdom. Consequently, they put pressure on the government to debate the issue in Parliament, and as a result, the Gorbals MP Alice Cullen spearheaded a new act to protect children from harmful publications. The Children and Young Persons Act, the Harmful Publications Act as it was known, became law in 1955 and is still in existence today, even though it's not really enforced. Now, the real horror out of all this, to come out of the story, would be the overreach of government. And the irony is that nothing could have been more wholesome than Scotland's homegrown comics that were subsequently banned.
Yeah.